The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, warming the surface of the worn oak table where the envelope lay. Its crisp white edges were out of place on the scratched wood, too clean, too sterile, too final. I'd stared at it for nearly 10 minutes, coffee growing cold beside me, before I finally slid a butter knife beneath the flap. My hands didn't shake, not exactly. It was something else, like my whole body had gone still, conserving energy for whatever this was about to be. The hallway still smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass from the maintenance crew downstairs. That scent always dragged me back to childhood summers at the O'Connor homestead, giant family reunions where the grass was trampled under a dozen folding chairs, and Aunt Lottie's potato salad always ended up attracting more bees than people. Back then, I was Mary, called out with affection, not with silence. Now, I unfolded the paper slowly. The sound of the creases cracking open felt louder than it should have been. _Meredith. I'm writing to let you know that we've decided not to include you in this year's family reunion. It's nothing personal, but things have changed. Please don't come. Dad. That was it. 4 sentences. Not even signed love, Dad. Not even a vague excuse. Just a severance notice, like I was being quietly fired from a job I never applied for. I sat there for a while, not blinking, not crying. My body knew how to brace for impact by now. The casserole dish sat on the counter, tucked into the same faded towel my mother had wrapped it in when she brought it over last Christmas. Turkey and wild rice, her signature. She said she'd made it for the road when I left early that evening after Darren had made a snide comment about some people needing to grow up, and Dad had nodded without looking at me. I hadn't touched the casserole, but I couldn't throw it out either. My phone buzzed. Mom. I picked up, more out of instinct than desire. Hello. Her voice was weak, like she'd already been crying. Mary, are you okay? The silence sat heavy between us, pulsing. I'm fine, I said, not even trying to sound convincing. A faint rustle on the line. I didn't know he'd sent that. He doesn't tell me things anymore. I didn't want to make her choose sides. I didn't want her to be the one crying for me again. You don't have to explain, Mom, I said gently. It's done. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. You're always my daughter. But what kind of daughter had to be reminded of that? After we hung up, another buzz, a text from Darren. Don't make a big deal out of it. Just take a break this year. A break? From what? Being related? I stared at the screen for a while before typing my response. Understood. That was it. No emotion. No punctuation. Not even my usual sign-off. Just, understood. I placed the phone down beside the casserole dish, which had grown cold again from the morning chill that sometimes snuck in through the windows. I touched the ceramic rim, tracing the faint crack running through the glaze. I remembered when Mom dropped it once in the driveway and insisted on repairing it with food-safe epoxy, refusing to let it go. Some things are worth holding on to, she'd said. Maybe, but not all things. I folded the letter back up and slid it into the envelope again, then tucked it in the drawer beside the scissors and loose batteries. Not out of sentimentality, just out of habit. Like maybe someday I'd want to show it to someone and say, this was the moment everything changed. The laptop was still open from last night. The financial spreadsheet blinked at me, the one I maintained for the family since 2019, when Dad got tired of keeping track of all the numbers. I had the passwords, the tracking sheets, the budgeting tools. I had done it all for free, out of loyalty. Out of love, out of a quiet hope that doing something useful might make them see me differently. I hovered the cursor over the login. My chest tightened, but not in pain. It was a quiet knowing, a confirmation. I shut the laptop and slid it across the table. The sun had moved higher now, casting longer shadows across the floor. My apartment was still and quiet, but I didn't feel lonely. Not anymore. Just empty in a way that felt clear. I walked to the sink, poured the cold coffee down the drain, and rinsed the mug slowly. The ceramic squeaked under my fingers. There were no tears. Not even now. Because this time, I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to make myself smaller just to be let back in. This was the day I stopped saving face for people who wouldn't even call me by name. As I wiped my hands on the towel, I felt it, that clean slice between past and present. A kind of strange relief. And then I opened the drawer again and pulled out a fresh notebook. Because if I wasn't Meredith O'Connor, the family's fixer, then maybe it was time to ask, who was I now? The afternoon light slanted through my blinds in soft, golden bars, and I sat at my kitchen table with the photograph spread before me. It was a snapshot from years ago, the entire O'Connor clan gathered on the back porch, arms draped around one another, smiles fixed like paint. Yet if I looked closely, I could see it. Darren's head tilted proudly toward Dad, while my own posture was poised just so, hands folded, eyes downcast. It felt like time had preserved a moment of performance, and I was the understudy. A hush settled in my chest, thick and heavy. Aunt Lila's words drifted back. Blood is thick, Mary, but peace of mind is thicker. I had never understood that fully at the time. Family meant loyalty, sacrifice, forgiveness, even when forgiveness was never asked. But now, in the quiet of my apartment, I felt her warning echo in the spaces between my memories. I closed my eyes and slipped into the old house. There was something comforting about stepping across that threshold, the feel of worn hardwood under bare feet, the lingering scent of cedar from the living room paneling. On Sundays, the long dining table groaned under the weight of platters, glazed ham carved into neat slices, cornbread square as tiles, Aunt Lila's signature pea and mint salad with its tangy dressing, and the sweet smoky aroma of Dad's famous barbecue ribs. The air buzzed with conversation and laughter, but for me it felt like a stage where everyone else had a role, but I never got to speak. Dad, Raymond O'Connor, held court at the head of the table. He'd lean forward, carving meat with a precise motion, eyes shining as he praised Darren. "That's my boy," he'd say, clapping Darren on the shoulder so hard the carving knife skipped. Darren would grin, chest puffed out, soaking in every compliment. I gathered napkins, refilled glasses, and passed dishes quietly, an invisible conductor keeping the show on track. Frances, my mother, hovered nearby. Her gentle voice cut through the clamor once. "Mary, sweetheart, the eldest daughter always suffers a bit, but you just have to stay strong." Her hand brushed my arm so softly I almost missed it. I forced a smile and nodded, because that was what strength looked like: patience, composure, invisibility. Then there was Aunt Lila. She always arrived early, a basket of cornbread in hand, apron tied tight around her waist. One afternoon, she slipped me a square of that warm, crumbly cornbread beneath the table while Dad's back was turned. I hid it in my lap, the sweet warmth unraveling a knot of confusion in my belly. She leaned down, voice low. "Family is not always right, Mary. Don't forget that." Her face was solemn, eyes distant, as if she'd carried that weight her whole life. Back in my apartment, I traced my fingertip along the photograph's edge. Pride and pity mingled in my mind. Pride in knowing I'd held everything together: birthdays, graduations, weddings. Pity that my price for that labor was being forgotten as soon as Dad needed someone new. I realized then what Aunt Lila meant. I had been chosen not for who I was, but for what I could provide, and only as long as I remained useful. I lifted the photo and tapped the glass that covered our smiling faces. I was never chosen, I whispered to no one. I was only allowed to stay when they needed me. The ache settled deeper, a hollow knowing I could no longer ignore. I folded the photograph carefully and placed it in the drawer with Dad's letter. I needed the space on my table for my life, not theirs. A sudden rush of tears stung my cheeks. I leaned forward and let them fall, unrestrained this time. They tasted of barbecue smoke and Aunt Lila's minty salad, of every meal I'd threaded together, every smile I'd forced. But the tears weren't weakness. They were a release. I sat there, chest heaving, until the sound of my own breath became steady again. The afternoon sun warmed my shoulders, and I felt the hush lift, replaced by something new, clarity. I rose and moved to the sink, rinsing the photo in running water to wash away dust and ache. As I patted it dry, I caught sight of the casserole dish from last Christmas, tucked in the corner. Its chipped edge reminded me that repairing something broken still left a scar. Aunt Lila had repaired that dish not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. And now it was mine to decide what to do with it. I carried the photo to my desk and set it alongside my notebook. Tomorrow, I would write a list of what I wanted, of what I no longer needed, of how to start choosing myself rather than be chosen. Because in that strange silence of remembering, I finally saw my childhood for what it was, not a portrait of love and belonging, but a lesson in self-worth. I arrived at the O'Connor garage office before dawn, as I often did, and flicked on the fluorescent lights. The familiar hum greeted me, but something felt off. My desk, once piled high with spreadsheets, invoices, and calendars, was nearly bare. A thin layer of dust coated the corners where I used to rest my coffee mug. I touched the desktop and felt a faint chill under my fingertip. I pulled open my email to find dozens of cold messages waiting. System notifications. Your access to vendor reports has been revoked. Your board meeting calendar invite has been canceled. Unauthorized login attempt detected. Please contact IT support. It was as if someone had pulled the rug out from under me, leaving only empty space where I'd once stood. Flashback. Years earlier, Dad had tapped me on the shoulder in this very office, smiled, and said, "Mary, girls are more careful with numbers. Can you handle payroll?" I'd beamed, eager to prove myself. I balanced accounts, reconciled receipts, and filed quarterly taxes, all while Dad and Darren took credit with clients and investors. I'd thought I was indispensable, but now I was unnecessary. I gathered the envelopes and folders that remained and carried them home, trying not to let my jaw clench. At home, I opened a battered cardboard box on the kitchen table, one of Mom's old cookie deliveries from happier times. A few crumbs lingered at the bottom, sweet reminders of her support when I was just finding my footing. I wrapped the box up and set it aside, careful not to disturb the memories. A lunch hour call from Darren arrived, his voice strained with entitlement. "So, did you see the latest expense reports? I covered a client dinner, top shelf sushi. It's fine, right?" His words dripped assumption. I hesitated before replying, "Darren, half those charges aren't client-related. They're personal." He laughed. "Oh, come on, Mary. Don't pry into things that don't concern you." His tone stung more than any insult. I remembered Aunt Lila's warning, "Peace of mind is thicker than blood." But here, blood had won again. That evening, I called Gretchen. Her voice was bright on the other end of the line, a lifeline. "Tell me everything," she urged gently. I described the revoked access, the canceled meetings, Darren's misuse of funds. She listened without interruption, then said, "Mary, this is systematic. Keep all the evidence, emails, logs, expense reports. If they're stripping you out, they're setting you up. Don't let them use you anymore." I hung up and stared at the blank screen. Then, with deliberate quiet, I opened my personal laptop and created a folder I named Redemption. Inside, I copied every email, screenshot, and spreadsheet that hinted at their exploitation. Each file felt like a brick quietly removed from the wall they'd built around me. For dinner, I heated leftover chicken soup and sat by the window watching a few leaves drift across the parking lot. The sun dipped low and the sky turned mauve. My phone buzzed, an email from the bank. Subject, inquiry. Body, there's something unusual about the loan application, bearing the name Meredith O'Connor. Please confirm your ownership interest. They still saw my name, still expected me to respond. But I was no longer their safety net. I typed a quick response. Please send details. I will review and respond in due course. Then I closed the laptop and leaned back. Invisible, yet still bearing the burden of every signature I'd ever signed on their behalf. I realized they needed me more than I needed them, and for the first time, that knowledge felt powerful. The crumbs from Mom's cookies glinted in the desk lamp's glow. I scooped them into my palm and tasted the sweetness. It reminded me that while I could be cast aside, I still had the strength to reclaim myself. I picked up the photo of Aunt Lila's cornbread moments, placed it beside the redemption folder, and whispered, "I'm coming back for what's mine." The slideshow began without me. I watched Darren's Instagram story loop through, laughter over clinking glasses, the private dining room lit by a single chandelier, platters piled high with smoked brisket and grilled corn. My seat had once been nestled by the window, tinted glass filtering afternoon sun into warm apricot tones. Now the window sat empty, a ghost at the table. I thumbed through the photos, scrolling past Dad's booming laugh, Frances's gentle smile, always just for a moment before retreating, and Darren, perched on a barstool, arm draped over a cousin I barely recognized. I took a steadying breath that felt heavier than it should, and closed my eyes. Last year, I'd sat in that room, countenanced the teasing comments about Darren's new job, and tried to laugh along. But this year, not even a glance my way. It was as though someone had rewritten the guest list and left my name blank. My phone buzzed, a message from Frances. "Mom, if you need anything, I'm here. Love you." Her words were kind, but the space between if and anything felt like a chasm. I typed back, "Me, thanks, Mom. I'm okay." I left it at that, didn't want to pull her into the storm. Another notification, Darren, tagging me in a candid shot. The caption read, "No Mary? No problem. Family fun starts now." Heat blurred my face out, but the message was clear. A grin split my chest, sharp as a broken window pane. In that moment, I felt something shift. Pain, yes, but also a fierce relief. If they could erase me so easily, then my attachment had been one-sided all along. The tickets in my calendar for that night's flights to Springfield sat unused in my email inbox. A year prior, I'd been packing my suitcase, thinking reunion meant reconnection. Now, I stared at the blue cancel reservation button and clicked it without hesitation. I was saving myself the heartbreak of showing up to a table that no longer had a place carved out for me. A postcard popped through my door a few days later. It was Aunt Lila's handwriting, her loopy script and little hearts over the eyes. I held the card to my nose and caught the faint scent of bourbon. She always sipped a small glass before penning her thoughts. Dear Mary, it read, I wish I could sit beside you one more time at that reunion table. You deserved all the laughter, all the stories, and every morsel of cornbread. Know that you deserve better than a seat behind a window. You deserve the whole sun. Love, Aunt Lila. I pressed my thumb against her words and felt their warmth. She'd always seen me, even when Dad and Darren looked everywhere else. In her small, steadfast way, Aunt Lila had given me permission to walk away. That night, I sat at my apartment desk under a soft yellow lamp and opened my laptop. My finger hovered over the settings menu on social media, every platform where O'Connor family photos, hashtags, and mentions had bound me to their story. One by one, I tapped deactivate, delete account, remove tag. With each click, I felt a chapter end and a new one begin. I paused only when I reached the cookie crumbs Mom had left behind from last week's care package, crumbs that tasted of cinnamon and comfort. I collected them in a small dish and inhaled their sweetness, a reminder that not all connections were toxic. Some, like Mom's love and Aunt Lila's support, were worth preserving. I closed the laptop. No more watching from the sidelines. No more waiting for the invitations that never came. I would not let my story unfold on someone else's terms. Just then, my phone lit up with an urgent email. The subject line read, Springfield Banking, immediate action required. Your business account has been temporarily frozen pending confirmation. Please verify ownership to avoid default actions. My chest tightened, but not with fear. This was familiar ground, another test of whether I would be pulled back under someone else's control or stand my ground. I picked up the phone and dialed the bank, ready to speak for myself, to reclaim whatever they thought they could take away. The office lights were dimmed to save on electricity, but my desk lamp burned bright, illuminating rows of spreadsheets that stretched across my monitor. The numbers blurred beneath my gaze until I forced myself to focus. Each line held a story, some of growth, some of daily expenses, and some more sinister, hidden between mundane entries. Years ago, Dad had said, family means trust. He pressed the words into me like a mantra. Whenever I hesitated over a signature or second-guessed an expense, he'd remind me, and I'd smile, heart warmed by his faith. But tonight, trust was a ledger entry I could no longer reconcile. I scrolled to the miscellaneous column, a catch-all category that Darren had controlled. A small charge here, a gift shop purchase, client appreciation. A larger one there, a vacation rental, site visit. And then a string of ATM withdrawals, each labeled as vendor payments. My throat tightened as I looked up the ATM location, a spa downtown. I bit my lip and clicked through the corresponding emails. None matched the descriptions. A ping sounded on my screen, an email from Ms. Patel at the bank. Subject line, urgent, signature required. Dear Meredith, our records indicate a new commercial loan has been drafted under your name and your father's. We require your formal acknowledgement or the application will be deemed incomplete and flagged as unauthorized. Please review and e-sign the documents by tomorrow morning to ensure legality. Sincerely, Ms. Patel, Springfield Regional Bank. I stared at the message, heart pounding. They were using my good credit to secure funding I barely understood, funding for expansions that Darren must have orchestrated. And because I'd been so careful, they assumed I would sign without question. My phone buzzed. Gretchen, talk to me, she said as soon as I answered. I don't know where to start, I admitted, rubbing my temples. These entries, They're not just client dinners. They're personal trips, charges for items that never went to the shop. They're all under family expenses, and now there's this loan. A soft inhale on her side. Mary, it's time to save yourself. Gather everything, emails, transaction logs, that loan notice. You have to show the bank the truth before they commit to it. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'm terrified. Good, she said firmly. Fear is the first step toward real action. I clicked through my file explorer and created a new folder within Redemption Loan Docs. I downloaded the loan agreement PDF, the bank's signature request, and all relevant transaction records. Each file landed like a brick in my hand, building a foundation for what I would do next. I glanced at the small tin of cookies Mom had left on my desk. One crumb lay on the corner of my mousepad, stale as the emotions I'd stashed away. I picked it up and crumbled it between my fingers, gritty and dry. I wondered when my own heart had gone that brittle. Determined, I reopened the bank link and clicked Withdraw Consent under my name on the loan application. The system prompted me to confirm, withdrawing your signature may delay or cancel loan processing. My cursor hovered. I closed my eyes and remembered Dad's proud smile when I'd balanced our books perfectly in college. The sense of accomplishment, the brief words of praise, Meredith, you found every penny. He hadn't meant for me to be his credit shield. He'd meant for me to be trusted. So I clicked Submit. A progress bar slid across the screen. My palms felt damp. The minutes stretched. Then, notification. Withdrawal request received. Processing. Your name will be removed pending review. No triumphant banner. Just a quiet message in black and white. I leaned back, exhaling a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Suddenly, the phone rang. Ms. Patel again. I braced. Ms. O'Connor, she began crisply. We have frozen the company's primary account pending review. You'll need to work with your father or co-signees to restore access. Her words fell on me like snowfall, unexpected, covering everything in white silence. Understood, I said, voice steadier than I felt. Then I hung up. I sat in the glow of my desk lamp, heart racing. The ledger had spoken. The debts they'd hidden now hung between us like a noose, but I'd taken the first step to loosen it. Tomorrow, I'd call Gretchen and plan my next move. I'd reach out to a trusted accountant, maybe even the state auditor if needed. I'd follow the breadcrumbs I'd laid out in my folders. I'd do more than withdraw my name. I'd reveal what they were trying to hide. Above all, I'd prove that numbers, no matter how manipulated, always tell the truth in the end. I rose, walked to the window, and gazed at the street below. Neon lights flickered as cars rolled home. Somewhere out there, Darren was waking up to a bank freeze he didn't see coming. And I was waking up to a life where I refused to disappear, where I finally mattered. I sat on the edge of my sofa, laptop perched on my knees, the screen bathed in pale blue light. Every click echoed in the silence of my apartment as I tried to log into the family account, only to be met with the stark message, access denied. The words felt endless, suspended in midair like a breath caught in my throat. Images flashed in my mind. Years ago, Dad had handed me a contract to sign, ink still wet, and said quietly, "You're an adult now. Remember not to disappoint our family." At the time, those words had filled me with pride. Tonight, they felt like shackles breaking. My phone buzzed. Frances. Mom. Mary, please. What are you doing? Why won't you answer? Her trembling text arrived like a lifeline tossed too late. I stared at it, chest tight, and dialed her number. Mom, I said, voice unsteady. I heard the bank froze everything, She cried softly. What have you done? I stopped signing for their mistakes, I replied, measuring each word. They were using my name to cover debts. It had to end. There was a long pause, then a shaky breath. But they're family. I know, I whispered. But family shouldn't cost me my peace. I ended the call and opened my email. There it was, Darren's name in the inbox, subject line, you ruined everything. I clicked it reluctantly. Meredith, you've destroyed the business. All our plans, the expansion's gone because you decided to play hero. Dad and I are left cleaning up your mess. Darren. He sounded furious, entitled, convinced I'd betrayed him. But betrayal required loyalty in the first place. I let the email linger and moved on. Another ping, Raymond's message. Meredith, we are family. How could you do this? You've jeopardized our livelihood. We trusted you. Dad. The sting in his words was familiar, a cold disappointment I'd carried since childhood. Yet somehow this felt different. It felt like freedom. My phone rang. Gretchen's name glowed on the screen. Hey, I answered. I just heard, she said, as gentle as ever. I'm so proud of you. I'm terrified, I confessed, closing my eyes. They need someone to clean up, but they don't need me anymore. That's exactly why you did the right thing, she said firmly. Remember our motto, you don't protect their lies at the expense of your truth. Don't back down. Stand your ground. I let her words settle before replying, thank you. I would need her strength in the days ahead. I sank back against the cushions, exhaustion washing over me. My eyes drifted to the kitchen counter, where a kettle whistled softly. I made a cup of black tea, just leaves and boiling water. No honey this time. No sugar. I cradled the mug, tasting the bitterness, and found it surprisingly comforting. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the sting. I welcomed it. A flicker of movement on my screen drew my attention back to the email notifications. Another message from Gretchen. My family is having a reunion. This time it won't be for celebration. Be prepared. Her warning hung over me. A reunion, yes, but not the same kind of gathering. I felt my pulse quicken. I washed the last of my tea in one swallow and set the mug down, determination replacing fatigue. I thought back to my first day at the office, how I'd meticulously organized every ledger, every receipt, every contract, so that the family could appear seamless. Now the ledgers lay exposed, and I held the truth. The fall they'd all feared had arrived, but in its quiet way, it allowed me to stand taller than I ever had. I gathered my laptop and headed to the small desk by the window, where the yellow light of the street lamp glowed through thin curtains. I opened a new document and typed. Day 6. The family empire trembles, but I am unshaken. I sat back and stretched, feeling the weight that had pressed on my shoulders for years slip away. My phone buzzed again. I looked down to see Darren's number flashing, a call I would not answer. Instead, I turned off my notifications and faced the darkened window. The world outside was still, holding its breath with me. Tomorrow, I would pick up the pieces on my terms. Tonight, I let the silence speak. The heavy wooden door of Fitzpatrick's Grill swung open with a hollow creak, and I stepped into the private dining room bathed in dim amber light. The long table, once crowded with laughter and toasts, had been rearranged into a rigid circle. It felt like a courtroom, each chair a witness stand. My heart beat steadily in my chest, not from fear, but from resolve. As I entered, all eyes turned to me. Dad sat at the head of the circle, expression unreadable. Frances flanked him, tears glistening in her eyes. Darren leaned back, arms crossed, radiating anger. And there, beside me, sat Gretchen, her calm presence a shield. Meredith, Dad began, voice tight. You requested this, explain. He gestured broadly at the empty chairs. What do you want? His question hung heavy, weighted by years of unspoken expectations. I took a quiet breath, pulling the crisp loan withdrawal letter from my coat pocket. I placed it face up on the polished oak. I did what everyone asked, I said, voice even. I cut it off. I watched Dad's jaw clench. Frances sniffled, shifting in her seat. Darren slammed a fist on the table. You ruined us, he snarled. Frances rose to her feet, tears slipping down her cheeks. Please, Mary, I just want our family back. Don't do this. Her voice trembled like a faltering candle. I pressed my lips together. I'm sorry, Mom, I said softly, but I won't sign lies anymore. Dad's eyes glistened. You think you're free of responsibility? You owe this family. I held up my hand. I owed my signature until it became my cage. That contract was never mine alone. It was a tool to keep me silent. I glanced at Gretchen. She nodded once, permission to speak. Gretchen leaned forward, placing a hand gently on my forearm. Every document is legal. Meredith followed correct procedures. This withdrawal is binding. Her words echoed off the paneled walls. Dad's stern facade cracked, and for the first time, tears welled in his eyes. He looked at me not as a daughter, but as a stranger who had dared to challenge him. I have nothing left to say, he stammered. Frances rose and reached for my hand. I allowed her to hold mine, the warmth of her grip bittersweet. I stood slowly, suitcase at my side. Then I'm done. I turned and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Darren mutter under his breath, but I was already stepping into the hallway. Before I closed the door, I paused and glanced back through the glass panel. Dad sat with his head bowed. Frances leaned into him, and Darren stared at the table, face ashen. I saw their silhouettes, O'Connor's without me. I let the door swing shut softly, the final click a seal on that chapter of my life. Outside, cool night air greeted me. I pressed my back against the door, closed my eyes, and let out a long breath. The heaviness that had sat on my shoulders for years, the need to belong, to placate, to forgive, lifted in that moment. I retrieved my phone and checked the family group chat. No new messages. Not even an apology. I felt a flicker of disappointment, quickly replaced by clarity. A waiter flicked on the neon open sign next door, and traffic hummed faintly in the distance. I walked away from Fitzpatrick's, each step lighter than the last. Food note. The plate of fries, my favorite snack as a child, laid abandoned on the table inside. Golden and untouched, like the welcome I never received. As I headed toward my car, I sensed I was crossing an invisible line. Behind me, an O'Connor world waited, unchanged, unforgiving. Ahead lay my own path, uncharted but mine. The late morning sun poured through the narrow blinds of my new office, painting stripes of light across bare walls. The room was small, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a potted fern Gretchen insisted on watering, but I'd never felt so at home. Everywhere I looked, empty shelves beckoned for books and mementos that belonged to me alone, not the O'Connors. I thought back to childhood dinners when I longed to choose my own entree, maybe a steak instead of the always safe chicken. That simple yearning had been the first stirrings of autonomy I barely understood. Today, I finally had the chance to make my own menu. My phone buzzed, an incoming call. Vivi Choi. Hi, are you Meredith Linwood? I saw your listing. I need someone I can trust. I swallowed against a rush of excitement and nerves. Yes, that's me. How can I help? Vivi's voice trembled. My ex-husband, to finalize our divorce, he's withholding property paperwork. I've lost hope. I closed my eyes, recalling Gretchen's words. This is your life, not the O'Connors. I drew in a quiet breath. Let's schedule a meeting and review everything. Later that afternoon, I packed a small notebook and met Vivi in her bakery. The scent of warm yeast and melting chocolate chips filled the air. She offered me a plate of freshly baked lemon cakes, the glaze catching the light like tiny promises. Thank you, Vivi said, voice soft as she pressed a cake into my hand. I trust you'll fight for me. I tucked the notebook under my arm and smiled. We'll get to the bottom of this. Back in my office, I pored over property deeds and emails. She'd shared a folder of scanned documents, mortgage statements, old rental agreements, and a text thread where her ex threatened to make her life difficult. I flagged discrepancies, duplicate signatures, missing pages, inconsistent dates. Gretchen popped her head in. Finding any ghosts in the machine, she teased, elbow resting on the doorframe. Ghosts and skeletons, I replied, gesturing to the screen. He's trying to claim a chunk of her bakery property as collateral. Gretchen crossed her arms, nodding appreciatively. Let's draft a notice of wrongful lien. I'll handle the legal filing. You prepare the financial rebuttal. We worked side by side, her legal know-how complementing my financial expertise. I felt my confidence solidify with each keystroke. A week later, we stood in the small courtroom. Vivi sat behind me, clutching my hand under the oak bench. The opposing counsel rifled through a stack of papers, his expression smug. I exchanged a glance with Gretchen, who gave me an encouraging nod. When the judge reviewed our evidence, the corrected deeds, notarized statements, and clear financial records, he frowned and turned to the other side. I find the lien to be invalid. Order discharged. Vivi's shoulders sagged, relief washing over her features. She burst into tears and hugged me fiercely. You did it. You saved my bakery and my future. I felt something swell in my chest, pride, purpose, and a warmth unlike any familial pat on the back. For the first time, I mattered not because of my blood, but because of what I could do for someone who needed me. Later, back in the office, Gretchen and I shared a quiet celebration. We cracked open sparkling water, toasting the page that had turned in both our lives. I'm proud of you, she said, raising her glass. This is just the beginning. I sipped and looked around at the bare walls with fresh eyes. This room, my growing room, held potential. Not the weight of 3 generations, but an invitation to bloom. My phone beeped. An email from Springfield Regional Bank. Subject: Release of liability. Body: Meredith Linwood, you are officially freed from all ties related to O'Connor Motors. No further obligations remain. I exhaled, hands trembling. Freedom, once tasted, stayed with you. I turned to Gretchen, eyes shining. It's done. She grinned. Now go build your legacy. I stood and stepped to the window, where the afternoon sun warmed the sill. Outside, the downtown streets hummed with life, bakers pulling fresh loaves, neighbors greeting each other, children playing in the park. My heart felt lighter than it had in years. I picked up the last lemon cake from Vivi's bakery, took a small bite, and closed my eyes. The sweetness lingered on my tongue, a reminder that sometimes the best flavors come from new beginnings. And this was just the first taste. Night had settled over Springfield, and my apartment glowed in the soft yellow light of a single lamp. I sat at the small kitchen table, a steaming cup of chamomile tea cradled in my hands. My phone screen illuminated a string of messages: Francis, Aunt Lila, Vivi, each tugging at a different thread of memory. The most recent was from Mom. Francis: Mary, I saw the old reunion photo I sent. If I can't forgive you, I hope you'll come home. My heart clenched. In that image, we all grinned in a circle. Dad carving the ham, Darren mid-laugh, Francis standing close behind him, and me at the edge, poised but distant. That photo was a perfect lie, hiding the silent currents that had threatened to drown me. I stared at it now, feeling that hush again, the hush of remembering. A buzz from Aunt Lila popped up. Aunt Lila, letting go is the only way to keep yourself. You belong to no one but you. Her words were a lamp in the dark. I typed back a quick heart emoji and set the phone aside. Alone, I closed my eyes and let the memories flow. I remembered Sunday afternoons in the city, the long drive to Dad's garage, the laughter over picnic tables under a steel gazebo. I remembered being small and proud when Dad would lift me onto his shoulders, saying, "This is my little girl." And I remembered the sting when he'd lift Darren next, with the same words, "my little man." I never felt less little or less me than in those moments. My tea grew cold, the steam curling like ghostly fingers around my mug. I thought of the letter, Dad's cold severance notice, and how it had freed me, but also opened old wounds. The past was a weight I carried for years, and now it trailed behind me like a shadow that whispered whenever I paused. Another message, this time from Vivi. Vivi, sister, I need you for one last financial matter. Can you help me first thing tomorrow? My chest tightened with a familiar sense of purpose. Helping Vivi had given me new life, and now she needed me again. I realized that guiding someone else through uncertainty was a way of tending to my own healing. I stood, boiled water for another cup, and pulled a small pot of rice from the pantry. As the grains bubbled, I set to work on a simple stir-fry with vegetables and tofu, no recipes, just instinct. Chopping, stirring, seasoning to taste. The aroma of garlic and ginger filled my kitchen, a whisper of home untainted by the past. A soft chime reminded me of Francis's text. I picked up the phone and drafted a reply. Me, I appreciate your forgiveness, Mom. But some doors can't be reopened. I'm building a different home now. I paused, deleted the words different home, and wrote instead. Me, thank you for your kindness. I'm finding my own place. I love you. I hit send. No urgent response. That was okay. I plated my dinner and carried it to the small window bench. Outside, street lamps glowed orange and a cool breeze rustled leaves. I took a bite of rice and veg, savoring the simple combination. No expectations, no borrowed history, just nourishment for me. The memories of affection and betrayal danced together. Dad's proud words, Aunt Lila's secret gifts, Mom's gentle comfort. Each thread had shaped me, but none would define me again. I folded the faded envelope that held Dad's letter. I pictured the words he'd written, _don't come, we are cutting ties, _ink as cold as winter rain. With a decisive snap, I tore it in two, then into quarters. I watched the fragments drift to the table like brittle leaves. I will not let myself be trapped again, I whispered. The wind tapped against the window pane as if in agreement. I took a final sip of tea, the warmth spreading through me, a quiet flame of resolve. Tomorrow, I would meet Vivi at her bakery, ready to guide her through her own crossroads. And I would carry forward a new truth, that sometimes the past slips in to remind us, but it cannot hold us back. I sat with the broken letter pieces before me, their edges sharp but harmless in my hands. Freedom had settled around my shoulders like a well-worn cloak, strange at first, but comforting in its promise. And as I washed the dishes in warm suds, I knew the threads of my past would always be part of me, but they no longer wove the whole tapestry. I was free to stitch my own pattern one day, one choice, one true moment at a time. Morning light filtered through the blinds of my small office as I poured 2 coffees, dark roast for me, a latte with oat milk for Gretchen. The aroma mingled with the faint scent of printer ink and paper files stacked neatly on my desk. We sat across from each other at the round table, maps of property lines and legal statutes spread before us. "Here's the plan," Gretchen said, voice steady. She tapped a highlighted clause in the lease agreement. "We argue that the lien placed by your ex isn't enforceable. We have proof of improper filing dates and forged signatures." She looked up, eyes bright. "Meredith, you'll handle the financial testimony, explain the discrepancies in his accounting." I nodded, heart thrumming with a mix of nerves and purpose. "I'll show them the transaction records, how he never paid the mortgage as claimed." Gretchen smiled, sliding me an extra packet of sugar. "This is your element now. Use it." I downed my coffee and gathered my notes. Outside, Springfield streets bustled with people grabbing morning coffees and waiting at bus stops. I felt a calm center in the chaos, a drive to do right by someone who needed me. At the courthouse, the waiting room smelled of polished wood and stale carpet. Vivi sat beside me, clutching her purse. Her eyes were bright with gratitude and fear. When the opposing counsel, a tall man in a charcoal suit, entered with 2 assistants, he nodded curtly. Gretchen rose and motioned me forward. "Let's get to work." Inside the courtroom, I took the stand and adjusted the microphone. The judge peered over her glasses, listening intently. The lawyer on the other side tried to paint Vivi as unreliable, claiming her records were incomplete. My pulse steadied as I laid out the truth, meticulous logs, bank statements, notarized documents proving each payment date and cleared transaction. I referenced each file, my voice firm, explaining how the lien was baseless and damaging. Vivi watched from the gallery, hands folded in her lap. I caught her eye and offered a small, reassuring nod. After a final argument from Gretchen, the judge leaned forward. "Based on the evidence presented, the lien is void. Ms. Choi's rights are upheld. The defendant is ordered to remove any encumbrances on the property." A hush fell, then Vivi's shoulders shook. She stepped forward, tears glistening. "If it weren't for you, Meredith, I wouldn't know what to do." She hugged me tightly as the courtroom emptied around us. Her gratitude echoed in my chest, and for the first time outside my family's name, I felt genuine pride. My skills, once hidden behind the O'Connor shadow, finally mattered. Later, Gretchen and I slipped into a nearby cafe. The barista knew us by name, handing over warm pastries and steaming cups. We toasted with our drinks. To saving someone else, and ourselves, Gretchen mused. I took a bite of a flaky almond croissant, sweet and slightly bitter. I never imagined this feeling being useful for the right reasons. She leaned back, eyes thoughtful. "You should expand your private consulting services, Mary. There are more people like Vivi who need someone to speak up for them." I studied the swirl of cream in my latte. The idea sparked something new, an invitation to carve out a space that was entirely mine. Food note: the cafe's dark roast and almond croissant carried the bittersweet taste of victory, small, earnest, and deeply satisfying. I left the cafe feeling lighter, the autumn sun warming my face as I walked down the street. Instead of the familiar dread of being overlooked, I carried anticipation. What next case would stretch my skills? Which life could I help turn around? As I glanced at my phone, a message from Aunt Lila popped up. "Aunt Lila, proud of you, dear. Keep shining." A gentle reminder that in helping others, I had illuminated my own path. I looked forward to tomorrow, when I'd sit down with new clients, not as the daughter of, but as Meredith Linwood, someone who could transform numbers into hope. I pushed open the door to Vivi's bakery on an early Saturday morning, and the warmth of fresh-baked bread wrapped around me like a familiar hug. The scent of cinnamon rolls mingled with the soft hum of chatter. I waved at Vivi behind the counter, but her smile faltered as a woman paused mid-bite into a scone and shot me a curious look. "Is that Mary O'Connor?" the woman whispered to her friend, voice low but loud enough. I took a seat at our usual corner table, flipping open my notebook. Around me, customers leaned in, exchanging hushed comments. I heard she cut the family out. She used to be one of them, brave or foolish? Their whispers crawled over my skin, a reminder that small towns amplified every rumor. Vivi joined me, sliding a mug of chamomile tea across the table. "They're talking about you again," she said gently. I smiled and raised the mug. The louder they whisper, the more I know I did the right thing. Aunt Lila arrived an hour later, radiant in a knitted shawl and carrying a basket of farm-fresh peaches. She settled into the seat across from me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen her so early. She must have come from the farmer's market next door. "Darling," she began, voice soft, "I saw how they looked at you. But remember, to live true to yourself is enough." I nodded, feeling the weight of her words. They cut through the gossip like sunlight through clouds. Vivi poured us each a second cup of tea. The women at the counter leaned closer, but Aunt Lila raised her hand as if blessing them with silence. They returned to their pastries, conversation hushed. Later that afternoon, I wandered through the farmer's market stalls next to the bakery. A vendor waved and called out Mary. "Those apples came in this morning. Would you like a sample?" I accepted a crisp slice, the sweetness and slight tartness dancing on my tongue. Fresh produce always reminded me of home, before everything turned sour. I thought of my old friend, Carol, who once defended my family's honor. We'd grown up side by side, sleepovers, school plays, shared secrets. But Carol had stayed loyal to the O'Connor name. She'd whispered her own disapproval when I walked away. As I passed a stand selling homemade pies, I saw Carol speaking with someone else. Her back was to me, but when she spotted my reflection in the glass counter, her shoulders tensed. She turned slowly, eyes avoiding mine. I approached her quietly. She straightened, offering a forced wave. "Carol," I said, gentle but firm. "It's been a while." Her gaze flicked to the apples in my basket. "Mary." I heard about Vivi's case. You did good work." Her voice wavered. I nodded, taking a step closer. "Thank you. That means more than you know." She hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe you were right. I'm sorry for how I acted." I felt my chest lift, vindication mixed with relief. "It's okay. We all make choices." Carol managed a small smile before turning away, her steps lighter than when I'd arrived. Back at the bakery, Aunt Lila was waiting with that basket of peaches now empty. She stood and pressed a new basket into my arms. "For you," she said, voice warm. "Take these apples home. Make a cake, treat yourself to something sweet. You deserve it." I cradled the woven basket, its straps digging into my palms. Inside, glossy red apples gleamed like newly minted coins. The market chatter softened around me as if nature itself approved her gift. The butterflies in my stomach settled. For the first time in months, I felt truly seen, not as the daughter who served family debts, but as someone worthy of kindness. I hugged Aunt Lila, whispering, "Thank you." She patted my back. "Just remember, Every new recipe starts with fresh ingredients. I stepped outside, inhaling the crisp air. Clutching the apples, I realized each fruity orb was a promise of new beginnings, baked into tender cake, sweetened by my own choices. Streetlights flickered against my office window as I sat surrounded by open emails and half-drunk mugs of herbal tea. The late-night quiet had become my companion, a space where I could finally sift through the debris left by my decision. Every ping of my phone felt like a tremor, a reminder that even when the earthquake ends, the ground still shudders. My inbox glowed with a subject line that made my chest tighten. Darren O'Connor, I'm sorry. I clicked it open. Meredith. Sis, I'm sorry. I'm really not okay. I was drowning in expectations, and I pushed you away when all I needed was a partner. If you can ever forgive me, please let me know. Darren. His words were simple, raw. I stared at the screen, heart pulsing. Forgive him to reopen a gate I'd closed? My finger hovered over the reply button. Another ping of Francis. Francis, I still love you no matter what. I don't always understand, but I hope you know my heart is with you. Tears welled. I closed my eyes, remembering the warmth of her embrace, the softness of her voice. Guilt pressed on me, heavy as a boulder. Yet beneath it lay something gentler, a budding relief, an awareness that my freedom had created space for honesty. I reached out to Gretchen. I don't know if I can forgive them without losing myself. Gretchen, choosing freedom is not betrayal. You can love them from afar, no longer sacrificing your well-being. Her message glowed on the screen like a beacon. I typed back a simple thank you, feeling steadier. On the desk, my phone vibrated with another email, this one from Springfield Regional Bank. Subject, Fund Closure Confirmation. Body, the O'Connor Legacy Fund has been officially closed. No further actions are required from Meredith Linwood. I exhaled, the words settling like a final heavy stone dropped from my shoulders. The fund that once tethered me to obligations and secrets was gone. The world felt still, quiet, in that new emptiness. To mark the moment, I decided to make the stew Aunt Lila had taught me, a hearty beef and vegetable stew simmered with thyme and red wine. It was a ritual she'd shared when I felt lost as a child. A bowl of stew warms more than your stomach, it warms your soul. I chopped carrots, celery, and onions on the kitchen counter. The knife's rhythm was meditative, each slice a farewell to lingering doubts. I sautéed garlic and herbs, then added beef cubes, letting them brown before slowly pouring in broth and wine. The kitchen filled with a comforting aroma that threaded together memory and hope. While the stew bubbled, I lit a single candle on the table. The flickering flame danced across the walls, casting warm shadows. I scooped the thick stew into 2 bowls and carefully carried them to my front door. Beside the door, Vivi stood, coat drawn tight against the chill. She smiled softly, eyes bright with curiosity. I thought you might need company, she said, taking 1 bowl. We sat on my small balcony, watching the city lights. Each spoonful was rich with tender meat and root vegetables, a taste of home reimagined on my own terms. Vivi stirred her spoon, then looked at me. This is more than stew. It's closure. I nodded, spoon halfway to my lips. I closed a chapter tonight, I admitted. And for once, the silence that follows doesn't terrify me. She smiled and raised her bowl. To new beginnings. I clinked mine gently against hers. To aftershocks that remind us we're alive. We ate in companionship, 2 women forging paths through life's tremors. Outside, the city hummed on. Inside, a new calm settled. The stew cooled, but its warmth remained in my veins, a testament that endings, even messy ones, could nourish the next day's growth. The morning sun glinted off the glass door as I unlocked it and stepped into the small suite Gretchen had found. A fresh coat of paint, a single desk, and a temporary sign taped above the window that read, Mary Linwood, Financial Advocate, coming soon. My heart fluttered with a mixture of nerves and exhilaration. No O'Connor, no familial echo, just my name. Callback. Yesterday in that old law office, I'd seen my name on file as Meredith O'Connor, co-signer. Today, it felt strange and liberating to see Mary Linwood, counselor. I placed a stack of freshly printed lease papers on the desk and slid them toward Gretchen. It's official, I said, voice soft. I'm on the hook for rent and responsibility, my own. Gretchen beamed, ticking boxes on her folder. Congratulations. Now let's build your brand. She outlined colors, warm teal and gold, logo concepts that spoke of stability and empowerment. Your story will draw clients who need someone who's been through this and come out stronger. Later, Vivi arrived carrying a camera and 2 steaming mugs of coffee. Branding shoot, she asked, grinning, setting the mugs on a filing cabinet. She'd traded her client hat for photographer today. We moved between the desk and a blank wall, capturing headshots, arms folded confidently, a thoughtful glance out the window, and a candid smile that reached my eyes. Each click of the shutter felt like another brick laid in the foundation of Mary Linwood. As we packed up, the door chimed. A woman in her early 60s stepped in. She looked around, admiration in her eyes. Are you the one who helped Vivi win that case? I felt a rush of purpose. Yes, that was me. How can I help you? She smiled, relief softening her features. My daughter's business partner is withholding funds, and no one else will listen. She placed a manila envelope on my desk. I'm hoping you can. I exchanged a glance with Gretchen and Vivi, who both nodded. This was why I'd done it, to be here, ready for the next person who needed me. Climax. I stepped outside and carefully hung the final sign on the window, Mary Linwood, Financial Advocate. The breeze fluttered the edges. My stomach tightened, old worries whispered beneath the surface, but as I pulled the sign straight, my confidence steadied. This was my name, my purpose. Back inside, my phone buzzed with an email notification. From Francis. Subject, update. Mary, I want you to know I rewrote my will. No expectations, just letting you know. Love, Mom. I paused, reading the words. No expectations. That simple phrase felt like both an apology and a blessing. I tapped out a reply. Me, thank you for letting me know. I love you. I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of 3 generations lift. Food note. Vivi emerged from the kitchen, carrying a loaf of banana bread. Mom used to bake this for me after tough days, she said softly, pressing a slice into my hand. In that moment, her gesture was like a second mother's embrace, comfort in flour and sugar, a silent, well done baked into each crumb. I settled into my chair, breaking off a warm piece of banana bread. The sweetness mingled with a hint of cinnamon, familiar, nurturing, but on my terms. Outside, a car idled briefly at the curb, and the woman from the door peered in, nodding as she saw the sign. I lifted my coffee in a silent toast, to myself, to my mother, to Aunt Lila, to all the threads that wove me into this moment. The road ahead felt uncertain, but for the first time, it stretched before me unshackled. And this name, Mary Linwood, was mine alone to write. The afternoon sun slanted across my office floor as I settled into my chair, a scan of Francis's email open on my laptop. The subject line was simple, "Will updated." My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Call back. I remembered the O'Connor Legacy Fund, co-founded with my father to support local businesses. I'd helped build it from scratch, drafting financial models, securing donors, managing distributions. Back then, I'd felt pride. Now, it felt like a chain I was eager to remove. The email read, Meredith, I've updated my will to reflect our changed relationship. You are no longer bound by any legacy obligations. No expectations, just letting you know. Love, Mom. My chest throbbed with a mixture of relief and sorrow. I closed the document and leaned back. The fund's ledger lay archived on my hard drive, dormant. This email was the final tombstone. I clicked reply and drafted. Mom, thank you for letting me know. I'm fine, and I hope you are too. Love, Mary. I paused, then sent. No anger, no recrimination, just acceptance. Later, I stepped out to see Aunt Lila off. She stood on the curb, suitcase at her side, final box of spices at her feet, oregano, thyme, and paprika she'd grown herself. She'd send it as a token of tradition, but also of permission to blend old flavors into new recipes. You've done well, sweetheart, she said, adjusting her shawl. I don't worry about you anymore. Her eyes glistened in the sun. Thank you, Aunt Lila, I whispered. For everything. She hugged me tight, soft and lasting, then climbed into the car. As it pulled away, I waved until her stout frame disappeared around the corner. Her departure marked an end, and the freedom to create my own path. Back in the office, Gretchen greeted me with a stack of business cards printed with Mary Linwood, financial advocate, and a bright envelope. She handed me the cards. Clients are waiting, she said with a grin. You ready? I arranged them in a neat fan on my desk. Let's do this. A knock sounded, and a young woman, late 20s, peeped in. She held a battered folder. Hi, I'm Jenna. You helped my sister with her startup, and she said you're the one person who listens. She offered a small smile. Thank you. Her gratitude warmed me more than any legacy ever did. I led her to a chair and opened her folder. This was my new legacy, guiding someone who needed support. That evening, I returned to my apartment and unpacked the box of spices. The aroma of dried oregano and smoky paprika filled the air, a gentle reminder of home and hearth. I arranged them on a small shelf, memory interlaced with hope. The calendar on my wall caught my eye. A date 3 weeks away was circled in green. Grand opening. Anchor and flame. My heart fluttered. I'd marked that day long ago when the sign went up and the first client stepped inside. Now, it represented everything I'd built without the weight of ancient expectations. I sat at my small kitchen table, a mug of chamomile in hand, and looked out at the city lights. No longer an O'Connor in title, I was still me, Mary Linwood, ready to chart my own future. The legacy was over, but my story was just beginning. The early spring air felt crisp as I stepped into the freshly painted office for its grand opening. Sunlight filtered through pale teal curtains, illuminating bouquets of lilies and tulips arranged by neighbors and clients. Vivi had tied a vibrant ribbon across the door, and Gretchen bustled about, greeting early arrivals with plates of mini quiches and sparkling juice. As a child, I'd watched my father cut ribbons at each new garage grand opening, dreaming of the day I might stand at that podium. Today, it was my turn, and the honor belonged to me alone. Vivi handed me a bouquet of pale roses as we waited. They've come for you, she whispered, nodding toward a small crowd gathering. I cradled the flowers, tasting my nervous excitement like the sweet center of a pastry. Gretchen tapped a glass gently. If everyone could lend me your attention, please. The chatter hushed, and I stepped forward. My heart thundered as I cleared my throat. Thank you all for being here, I began, voice steady. Today is not just the opening of an office, it's the first day of a promise I made to myself. Thank you to those who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. I paused, scanning friendly faces, a young entrepreneur clutching her tablet, a retiree from down the street, several neighbors who'd brought flowers. No one wore an O'Connor name tag. Just Mary Linwood, financial advocate, counselor, and human being. This space will be a safe haven, I continued, for anyone seeking clarity, support, and respect. I'm not here as the daughter of someone else's legacy. I'm here as me, ready to help you write your own story. Polite applause rippled through the room. I set down the bouquet and held open a knife for the cake Gretchen had ordered, a simple pecan pie, its crust golden and nuts dusted with sugar. A symbol, she'd told me, of rebirth, brittle shell hiding sweet resilience. After the speech, Gretchen and Vivi mingled with guests, and I welcomed a young woman with hopeful eyes. Can you help my daughter? An elderly lady asked, voice trembling. She's starting a catering business, but worries about contracts and funding. I smiled, offer extended. Absolutely. Have her call me tomorrow. Her relief shone in her eyes, and she clasped my hand. Thank you, Mary. You're a blessing. I guided her to Gretchen, then turned to sign the first contract under my own name. The pen felt weighty and right as it glided across the paper. Mary Linwood, financial advocate, no middle initial, no hidden surname. The contract now had my stamp, my responsibility, my promise. In that moment, I realized how far I'd come, from smoothing over my brother's missteps to carving a space where own steps mattered most. I moved to the window and saw Mom's old car parked across the street, its familiar silhouette stirring a gentle lake. Our eyes met, her tentative wave, my steady nod. No expectations, just understanding. A flutter of emotion brushed my cheek, but I turned away with a calm smile. Today was about new beginnings, not old ties. Food note. Later, Vivi and I shared a slice of the pecan pie. The sweet, nutty goodness reminded me that resilience often emerges from the hardest shells. I curled my fingers around a warm mug of cinnamon spice tea, the steam dancing in the crisp October air. The lake beyond the cafe window glistened under a pale sun, its surface rippling like the pages of a journal. It had been months since I tucked Dad's severance letter into a drawer, its jagged edges a symbol not of pain, but of triumph. Now it lay silent, a quiet testament to how far I'd come. Callback, that opening envelope, once a wound, had become proof that I could close one chapter and begin another. Today, the task was simple, write in my diary. I spread the leather-bound book on the table, pen poised above the first blank page. I am not the O'Connor girl anymore. I am the one who rebuilds herself, brick by careful brick. I paused, watching a small flock of ducks drift across the water. The words felt right, like the first stones laid in my own foundation. I glanced up as a little girl tugged at her mother's sleeve and bounded over. "Miss Mary," she exclaimed, eyes wide. "I want to grow up just like you." Her innocence caught me off guard. I knelt so she could see my face. "What makes you say that?" I asked gently. She grinned, pointing at the stool beside mine. "You help people with their money dreams. I want to help dreams too." Her mother smiled shyly. "Thank you, Meredith." She's always admired strong women. My heart warmed. Here, by a lakeside cafe, my influence rippled outward, beyond family ties, into new generations. Vivi slipped into the chair opposite me, her tablet in hand. "I just saw your article," she said quietly. She tapped the screen. "Freedom doesn't come from forgiving others, but from forgiving yourself." "I wanted to share that," she smiled. "It really resonates." I folded the paper and tucked it between the diary pages. "Thank you for that. It took me a long time to understand." I pulled the Warren family photo from my bag, a group of smiling faces at the old reunion table. I studied it one last time. My angled posture, Dad's cheer, Darren's grin. I tapped a grimy corner and saved the image to a dedicated folder labeled Archive, Lessons Learned. I didn't delete it. I just released its hold over my heart. A breeze rattled the window panes. I closed the notebook and sipped my tea, its cinnamon warmth anchoring me in the present. I'm Meredith Linwood, who has shared with you my journey from the darkness of family to the light of freedom over the past 16 chapters. Perhaps what moved me most was the power of forgiveness, not only for others, but first and foremost for myself. Each of us needs a warm embrace, an open heart to overcome the storms of life. And sometimes, letting go is not a betrayal, but an opportunity to find yourself again. And you, have you ever felt lost among your loved ones? Or have you ever stood at a crossroads between responsibility and freedom and wondered which path to choose? Please share your experiences in the comments section. I'd love to hear your story. If this story brings up a memory or a lesson for you, leave a 1 and let me know where you're watching this video/article from. If you love these heartfelt confessions and transformation journeys, don't forget to subscribe or follow so you don't miss out on future videos and articles. Thank you for listening and accompanying me on this long journey. I hope you always find the strength to write your own story. See you on the next journeys.